Hello, I'm Nadia, and today I'm going to talk about the beginning of the Allied liberation of Europe in 1944, which began, of course, on the 6th of June with the D-Day landings. In the run-up to that operation, 3 million Allied troops had assembled in the south of Britain, ready to make the sea crossing to northern France and the beaches of Normandy. There were 4,000 ships ready to take them across the sea, the largest armada in history. This is one of the most iconic photographs of World War II. It's known as Into the Jaws of Death, and it shows American troops wading through the water to reach Omaha Beach. And it must have been a truly terrifying experience, because laying in wait for the Allied troops were 50,000 Germans who were firing on them as they tried to reach shore. But on the 6th of June, nearly 160,000 Allied troops from America, Britain and Canada successfully stormed the beaches of Normandy, but casualties were very high. 4,500 died on that day alone, and of those 2,500 were Americans. By the end of June, a staggering 875,000 Allied troops had landed in Normandy, and this photo shows the delivery of tanks, trucks and other equipment and supplies. It was a truly massive logistic operation. The heroism of the troops who landed in Normandy is well recognised and celebrated every year with D-Day commemorations. This map shows the location of the landing zones in Normandy, and the American troops landed on Utah and Omaha Beach, which were to the western side of Normandy, and their plan was to first clear the Cotentin Peninsula up here before swinging south towards Brittany. The British and Canadian forces landed further over to the eastern side of Normandy, and they found progress very difficult because they met stiff resistance from German troops that were very well dug in and concealed behind thick hedgerows in this region. There was another army that played a pivotal role in the Normandy campaign, but sometimes they don't seem to receive the same recognition as the other Allied armies. I'm talking about the Polish 1st Armoured Division shown here. These were men who had already defended Poland in 1939 and escaped from there to help defend France in 1940. So they ended up fighting in the front lines of 3 campaigns against Hitler, which was more than any other Allied army. One of these men was my father, Captain Marcin Rupniak. In France, the Poles served under the command of the Canadian Army, with the idea of improving communications. But the Polish soldiers had to navigate difficulties in communication with their English-speaking allies that went beyond the obvious linguistic challenges. Their country had been under enemy occupation for 4 years, and not only were they anxious about the fate of their families back home, but just as they were arriving in Normandy, there was a new crisis unfolding. Polish insurgents had launched an uprising in Warsaw that seemed doomed to end in a bloodbath, unless the German army could be drawn away to support the Germans in France. So the passion felt by the Polish soldiers was unlike that of any other soldier involved in Normandy, and their urgency to liberate their country and fight was sometimes misinterpreted by their allies as recklessness. By early August, the Americans were making good progress and had started to swing south towards Brittany. And this so concerned Hitler that he took personal command of the German army. And this proved to be a fatal error, because he ordered the German army to advance west towards Avranches in order to cut off the Americans on the Cotentin Peninsula. With orders to hold every inch of ground to the death, Hitler unwittingly was sending his own men into a death trap. He played directly into the hands of the Allied commanders, who seized the opportunity to encircle the German army. The American general Omar Bradley could hardly believe his luck. He said, "This is an opportunity that comes to a commander not more than once in a century." The dotted line here shows the beginning of a ring of encirclement around the German army, and over the coming days this noose became tighter and tighter, with the French city of Falaise at its epicentre. By mid-August, the encirclement of 100,000 German troops was almost complete. Panicked and fleeing Germans were running across open fields everywhere or becoming bogged down on congested roads, trying to escape. And they made easy targets for bombing by Spitfire and Typhoon bombers that were flying thousands of sorties every day over this region. Under constant aerial bombardment, these troops became totally disorientated and panicked, and chaos had spread throughout the German lines. Receiving orders late on August the 17th, the Polish 1st Armoured Division was tasked with closing the last remaining exits from this noose, sealing it like a cork in a bottle, as the British General Bernard Montgomery put it. So the last remaining exit that remained open was near the city of Chambois here, through a main escape route that led to another city called Vimoutiers. Despite the late hour, the Polish commander, General Maczek, knew how imperative it was to stop the escape of more German troops as quickly as possible. And so he decided to execute these orders immediately. So in the dead of night, Polish tanks were passing right through enemy lines, the panicked Germans seemingly not even recognizing that they were driving Sherman tanks. And Maczek sent his men to a hill known as Mont Ormel, or Hill 262, because this had a terrific vantage point overlooking a vast area containing the zone of encirclement around the German troops below, but it also overlooked their main escape route through this valley and a road that led to Vimoutiers. Now, looking at a relief map, Maczek thought that the shape of this hill resembled a medieval club, and so he nicknamed it maczuga, which is Polish for mace. Now, the plan was that the Poles would take up their position here, overlooking the main escape route, and that they would link up with their American counterparts who were headed for Chambois, and with Canadian troops in Saint-Lambert and Trun. But what actually happened in practice was, because the Polish troops had raced to reach Maczuga, travelling overnight, they became completely isolated on this hill for 48 hours, because their Canadian allies over here and their American allies down here in Chambois were bogged down in heavy fighting and were unable to link up with them right away. So for those 48 hours, 1,500 Polish soldiers equipped with 80 tanks and 20 anti-tank guns on Maczuga were the only thing that stood between encirclement and freedom for tens of thousands of panicked German troops. And of course, once the Germans realised that the Poles had occupied this hill and were trying to block their escape routes, they directed their own attacks on this hill to try and eliminate this Polish position so that they would be able to escape. Among the men on Maczuga was my father, a battery commander. He was in charge of 58 men operating weapons and artillery ranging from rifles to armoured vehicles. He was in a specially modified Sherman tank called an observation post, like the one shown in this photo. It had a fake wooden cannon because it had been specially modified to house various radio stations, a map console, and a periscope. His job was to observe the enemy positions and direct the fire of his battery through radio communications. Soon after the Poles had taken up their position on Maczuga, 2 convoys of trucks loaded with German troops, staff cars, and horse-drawn guns arrived at a road junction below. The Poles opened fire on them, setting the procession ablaze in a mangled mass of bodies and equipment, and it rendered the road completely impassable. On discovering that the Poles had taken the hill, the Germans then launched an all-out assault to eliminate them, attacking them both from within the Falaise pocket and from outside. The Germans launched an intense mortar and artillery assault on the hill, which continued day and night. And a unit of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, which was outside the Falaise pocket, supported this German breakout, ambushing the Poles from behind. During a ferocious battle, enemy tanks met at point-blank range, as you can see in this photo. 12 Polish Sherman tanks faced off against 16 giant German Tiger tanks. Within minutes, 6 Polish tanks had been destroyed. A hail of shelling from Polish anti-tank guns set 5 German tanks ablaze, and their attack was broken, and 3 more enemy tanks were destroyed as they withdrew. During this battle, my dad was almost killed when a German shell hit his tank. He managed to escape through the turret with shrapnel wounds to his leg. Incredibly, he had the presence of mind to escape the tank, taking a radio set with him so that he could maintain control of fire by his battery. His service record says that he was awarded the Cross of Valour for his remarkable command of artillery fire on Maczuga, despite the destruction of his tank. Even after this tank attack had been repelled, the German onslaught was relentless. Next, hundreds of German infantry soldiers ascended the hill on foot, singing the German national anthem. Polish artillery shot them down. In their place came another wave, and then another. Still, they kept coming. By the 5th assault, the Poles were out of ammunition and had to resort to bayonets, killing Germans in gruesome hand-to-hand combat. There were 8 such waves in total. And by the end of the day, this hillside was carpeted with thousands of bodies. The exhausted Poles were out of ammunition, out of petrol, food and water. Their situation was hopeless. The Polish commander, Major Stefanovic, addressed his officers, only 4 of whom had escaped injury. "Gentlemen, all is lost. I do not think the Canadians can relieve us. This night we will be dying for Poland and civilization." At dawn on the 21st of August, the Poles again heard the ominous rumble of tanks advancing towards them. Bracing themselves for the worst, they could hardly believe their eyes. They were Canadian tanks. The Falaise pocket was sealed. This was a pivotal achievement, marking the beginning of the defeat of Germany. 50,000 German troops were forced to surrender, and another 15,000 had died in the horrific battle. You can see on the right that many of these soldiers were just teenagers. Maczuga was an apocalyptic scene of death and destruction. General Dwight Eisenhower said that these were scenes that can be described only by Dante. It was literally possible to walk for hundreds of yards at a time, stepping on nothing but dead and decaying flesh. He said it was unquestionably one of the greatest killing fields of the war. You can find more information about the contributions of the Polish military to World War II and other topics in my other videos. Thank you for watching.